Mr. Denius Radzeviçus, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on your new position as the media ombudsman in Lithuania. So you have held several important positions over the years. That's why with your extensive experience in both the leadership roles and academic activity, how would you define the role of free media in the democratization of societies?
I can bring example of my country, of Lithuania, which are most important part. Even during Soviet occupation in Lithuania, we had independent underground media. All the time during Soviet system, which used propaganda machine with official media. But Lithuania, we published many newspapers in Lithuanian language, providing for people alternative information, critical voices about occupations, the Soviet system, and so on. And based on that, as you know, Lithuania was first country which left Soviet Union, and independent critical media, so-called pluralistic media, which was different, even official state-owned broadcaster, they had journalists who criticized more than in most of Soviet countries some problems and challenges in the country. And that's why I would say, even for bringing independency and democratic system for country, media is more important than constitution or all the regular regulations and systems, because independent pluralistic media, this is part of communication between people and for people and about people. That's why this is key role, actually. This is even more important, I mentioned, as most of human rights issues, media. And that's why in 1996, for example, in my country, with adoption of new media law and also new law on public broadcast activities, Lithuania was decided that it's not allowed for any governmental or municipality institution to own media. In 1996 was adopted law about system with two types of media, public broadcaster and private media only. The state decided even news agency, which was owned by state, bring to process of privatization. And all media workers, including journalists, any persons in media, not only journalists actually, all the workers of media, they immediately started to be owners of media. And because of that, we have in my country, but not only in my country, in most of countries, we have these two types of media at least. Public media, with support of state usually, with different systems, which brings some guarantees about pluralism, you know, and different voices. And the rest is like private media. And I would say, from my perspective, it's one of the best, or maybe even best system in the world, bringing, even in small countries, even in countries which has not very high competition, but they bring different media types for different audiences, for different needs, and that's about democracy. Different voices, different pluralistic media, different types, that's democracy. It's crucial.
Well, after Russia's full scale of invasion of Ukraine in 2022, in Lithuania, considering the rise of the Russian propaganda, fake news, and disinformation, Lithuania banned several pro-Russian TV channels. How effective has this step been in protecting Lithuania's information space from Russian propaganda, and what challenges still remain?
Yeah, officially in Lithuania, not only in Lithuania, but in Lithuania was all the time, it's very clear, the invasion of Russia started in 2014. And this officially position of my country and country like Ukraine was a reason why me, for example, I was part of Commission of Radio and Television, which are regulatory body of radio and television. I remember when we decided to investigate cases about spreading war propaganda based on hatred, hate speech, including different nations like Russians, Ukrainian people, and so on, with fake stories and everything, you know, with different types of media, country of residence and country of destination. Country of residence when you are based in this country, but in my case, in Lithuanian case, we had a lot of channels which has different regulation. They are based somewhere in European Union countries, in Russia, but also in Sweden, in UK, Ofcom, for example, licenses, French. But they provided information mostly in Russian language, also English language, German language, spreading information for audience in Lithuania. And based on that, after investigations and searches, we decided with few programs, like one of so-called famous propagandists, Mr. Solovyov, and also some more guys. I will not provide advertisement for them, but you know, Kiselev, Solovyov. First programs was investigated as a hate speech and hatred provided programs with propaganda of war. And we decided with legal process, with court system and everything, to inform these channels that they are providing, and then they break our law. We had some negotiations. They still provided this information based on so-called freedom of speech values. We asked them, it is normal in your country, for example, in Russia, to provide the same information. For example, please kill the Russians. Would be okay for you? I said, no. Said, why your country provide information in our countries? And we announced a legal decision that these programs cannot be transmitted to our country. This was the challenge for IPTV channels, but also so-called cable TV, because they cannot interrupt in the programs. Usually, you know, we have a whole channel. But we decided, because only these programs included hate speech, according to our decision, we cannot, and we don't like to ban all channels. Please exclude these programs only. And they decided, most of channels, that they cannot cut the program according to the licenses and everything, and they excluded all the programs. And officially, in most of platforms, in OSCE platforms, I heard many times that Lithuania are banning channels. We didn't ban channels. We banned programs which provided hate speech, which is less restriction with all channels, but all channels was excluded by providers of information and so on. And I would say it's the best effect of that with this message for society, that some kind of programs, it's like poison for you, for your friends, because it's based on specific, very negative impact, hate speech and hatred. And even communication on that and explanation for society, why so bad? We had data that when in programs of these channels, this propagandist fake stories, guys are lying with some, for example, kids was crucified in eastern Ukraine, which was fake story actually. After such fake stories, in my society, more and more people, they started to hate Russians. Because if Russian-speaking media and Russian so-called journalists, propagandists in Russian language, like Russian people providing fake stories based on hate speech, Russians who are living in Lithuania, they are outside this business actually, but just because they are also Russians, they got some negative impact. And that's why it was not to protect Ukrainian people, but to protect Russian people from Russia propaganda, because Russian propaganda with hate speech brings more negative emotions against Russians. Like nowadays we have in many countries, it's very toxic to be Russian with Russian passport, and even to speak in Russian language is so bad, you know. Some people who are went to different European countries, being not Russians, but speaking in Russian language, sometimes they hear something like Putin and so on, because if people hear the Russian language, they mean you are Russian and maybe you come from Russia. And this effect in Lithuania, we already in 2015, we faced in my country, that official Russia state-owned propaganda are affecting people with very bad emotions against Russians even. You asked me about 22. In 2022, already most of European countries did the same, which was already done by us in Lithuania many years ago. But this is affected very good because it's not about restrictions, not about banning, because many people, they have alternative. They have VPNs, they have satellite TV. It's not about access to such kind of information, but knowing that this is poisoned content, This is even more important for people who are saying this is just another opinion. They know it's not opinion. This is fake, which are based on hate speech. And this is official decision made by experts, by community, by people, because in our decision making, we use, independent experts, usually 2 experts, who during linguistic and visual research, they bring detailed explanation why such kind of, for example, reportage or program brings hate speech and hatred effect to public sphere. This is not just, no. We need to go through process in democratic countries to explain and to prove a few times, is it just opinion or is this already something breaking the law?
Well, one of the main priorities of the office is the monitoring and analysis of the public information in Lithuania. How do you verify violation reports received from citizens, especially from the NGOs and initiative groups engaged in media monitoring? And if such cases, reports are confirmed, what actions are taken?
Depends on, because we are dealing with disinformation, hate speech, hatred, also information have negative impact to minors, but also GDPR issues, private information. I mean, we have a lot of human rights issue related to media, also insulting of reputation and privacy, as already mentioned. Depends on this, we have different decisions. In practical life, we have most of complaints which has no really ground about it. I mean, people are complaining because they are unhappy with some kind of negative information, but this is not breaking a law, actually. I mean, this is question of, I don't like this kind of information. And that's why we need to explain for people, maybe it sounds bad for you, maybe some words are not, good for your ears, criticizing someone with very critical words and something like that, but this is not breaking a law. And we explain for people, look, this is question maybe of ethic issues a little bit, or culture or morality, but it's not against, freedom of speech. That's why this is okay. But in some situations, usually we're bringing decisions to people and to NGOs saying that, okay, this is a problem about some human rights and everything. We usually, during the process, we're informing media channels, social networks, platforms, and so on. And if they break a law, and this is like with arguments decision, usually they depends on kind of information. Sometimes it's private, for example, information, they put it out. Sometimes they just change some, definitions, some issues, or change some kind of content which can violate, which bring some negative impact for people according to law. We can also bring some orders to the court if media are breaking like really a lot of things, even maybe to close the media, but the decision are taken by courts. My institution can bring a decision that this is breaking a law, some evidences, and we can go directly to the court. In some cases, we are banning websites. In Lithuania, we have some cases I will share with you. You can open it with VPN for sure, but in Lithuania, officially, you cannot open such kind of websites, which brings hate speech, hatred, and disinformation officially. But you can open it freely with VPN. People do if they like. But if you would just put to website from Lithuanian official, web browser and everything, you will go directly to website of my institution with disclaimer that this site is banned from Lithuania because we're breaking the law. Yeah, and in some cases also, depending, for example, on GDPR issues, like using also for disinformation, we can bring some sanctions, but not directly our institution. Usually we bring to prosecutor office, for example, this kind of information, and then police offices and prosecutor offices, usually they complain to us. They're sending not complaints. If they have complaints about pornography issues or disinformation cases, based on our expertise, they can go even to criminal procedure issues. But this is very few actually cases. In most of cases, we don't have really big issues about it. I mean, it's more exception than the rule. what we are dealing with.
Well, as we are discussing the violations in mass media, relevant institutions and organizations play a critical role in media monitoring and imposing penalties in case that kind of violations are detected. But today, social media also plays a critical role, especially disseminating fake news and hate speech. So we also saw that the rise of the gender-based hate speech, especially in media and social platforms, especially targeting female journalists, politicians, and activists. What strategies does the office have to combat gender-based hate speech and discriminative narratives in both traditional and social media?
Let's talk about platforms, because all the media nowadays is more or less traditional already, because for some people Facebook is like a traditional media, more traditional than print media actually, because print media is old-fashioned for them. Maybe you know it. In Lithuania, we have two institutions which are officially dealing with, for example, TikTok, Facebook platforms, and we can report them. We have persons, for example, in my office, who can officially, with specific channels, communicate with them about excluding some kind of content which violates human rights, including disinformation, deepfakes, and so on, which are quite complicated issue on one hand, because we have local legislation system, but we have also European Union legislation, DSA Act, you know, this Digital Service Act, and that's why we are using different actions. Actually, sometimes we are reporting these platforms, and they exclude some content. Sometimes we are using some more detailed, action plans, including some institutions with cooperation with them. And I would say the main challenge in this case is only one. According to European Union legislation, most of violation of human rights issues are more or less questioned more regarded to country of residence. In case of Google and Facebook, it's Ireland. We are dealing with this country regulatory body. We have the Lithuanian regulatory body, and we are using, let's say, European Union structures and local structures to communicate about violation of human rights. And taking decisions depends on concrete situations or systematic violations and scams and everything. I mean, we have different challenges and breaking the law situations, but if you mention some people, for example, who are facing this problem, for example, now we have the challenge that many journalists' faces and voices are used for deepfakes. And we already did a lot of things with media associations and media organizations, how to protect themselves directly, not just using our institutions, but bringing reports directly from media institutions to Facebook platforms and so on, just to stop spreading this kind of different scams, disinformation cases, hate speech. Different formats are used in deepfake issues with voices and faces of journalists, just to bring in more valuable, information. That's why I would say cooperation with media organizations on one hand, police officers another one, and also regulatory bodies and partners dealing directly with media platforms and representatives of platforms with changing algorithms and everything. This is third part. And also legal process sometimes also, but generally speaking, this is cooperation between institutions using legal instruments which are already acknowledged by European Union and local legislation.
Well, sometimes the principle of freedom of expression in the media environment is used as an argument to justify the spread of hate speech, disinformation, and discrimination. In such cases, how does the office distinguish between freedom of expression and hate speech, discrimination? Also, how do you prevent the abuse of the free speech while preserving its essence?
It's a very good question, because in any situation which are discussed or investigated in my office, usually because also of local legislation, we have constitution in Lithuania which are very similar to so-called international human rights standards. We need to evaluate both sides. I mean, any complaint or any investigation about breaking a law or violation of some human rights automatically brings evaluation with public interest, for example, to get this information, to freedom of speech, to free access to information generally about opinions, for example, freedom of opinion. And it's not the very simple answer, because in most of cases it's about how, but not about. I mean, this is like filtering system. We have all the topics in our media sphere, and this is no question. We can discuss any of them. Very, very clear message. The second, how, this is already our business to investigate here with our experts. I use some specific tools, words, visualizations, which breaks a law because of insulting some specific groups or people, or bringing some, systematic hate speech or hatred, effects and everything. And this is usually a case which needs more than one evidence somehow, or arguments, more than one argument. But this is not just, wow, this is bad things. No. You need to bring a lot of arguments. Why is, in the context of freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, freedom of media, free access to information. And this is not easy, actually, for most of colleagues, because if they find a public interest in most of cases, even it's quite, complicated, let's say, opinion, but if they don't break clearly a law, you would protect freedom of speech, actually, because I said, it's freedom to speak about everything. Sometimes people say this is a problem. It would be better some topics not to discuss publicly at all, but that's not our case, actually. and yeah, this is argument to protect your opinion. I mean, it's everything fine if people speaks very critically about something, very negatively about something, and they have this feeling, this is part of freedom of speech and public interest. It's good. We have a lot of cases in courts, actually. Many of our decisions taken in my institution, they got a lot of complaints, and we have courts cases in first instance, second instance, appeal instance, and even in high courts. That's normal process in democracy. We need to prove one and second and maybe third time, depends on how people brave to protect themselves. It's okay. Well, it's complicated. It's okay, but it's complicated.
At times, certain restrictions stemming from the journalistic ethics may be perceived as the suppression of freedom of expression. So how does the office balance between the freedom of expression and the ethical principles?
That's the best question ever. The long story short, in 1996, for a very short period, Commission of Ethics of Publishers and Journalists, we have different name of this institution nowadays. This is Association of Ethics of Provision of Information to Society, including publishers, media, producers, journalists, and even academics and the Commission. But already many years, it's very clear restriction. My office are dealing with human rights issues in media, but all the questions of ethics and adoption of ethic rules is part of self-regulation. State doesn't involve in this process at all. And the good news is also about cooperation. It's only one thing, that candidates to be media ombudsman in my country, Lithuania, are provided by media self-regulation system. It's approved by parliament, but candidates are selected by media organizations. It's only one connection between my institution and Commission of Ethics. We have some, activities together about, for example, leads, and articles, how it provided sensational news and everything. But it's based on cooperation, discussions, regulation and self-regulation. And usually media are trying to bring more self-regulation issues. to avoid regulation of state. And that's good. Long story short, it's based on self-regulation. If we have some complaints about ethics of journalists, we immediately transmit all these messages to self-regulation.
In the end, we have a traditional question. It's about book recommendations, and I'd like to ask this famous question to you. What book or books would you like to recommend to our audience to read?
Wow, many books. Starting with Montesquieu, classical book about spirit, of the law and regulation. But my favorite nowadays book is about people, about audience, about humans who are consuming media and speeches and they're involved in process communication. This is Irrational Ape. You can buy this book on Amazon. I provide for my students, which are very good book for all the people who are dealing with media regulation and self-regulation to understand. But doesn't matter how to speak sometimes. But most of people, they have personal opinions and contexts. And sometimes if you provide negative information about people, they can think about these people in a positive way. If you're criticizing, it's like, example, I mentioned Mr. Trump was criticized by many professional media, and that's okay. But some of people, they say, okay, if media criticizing you, you are a good guy. It's a very different effect. And this book about irrational ape as a human nature, that people, they would like to avoid arguments and logic. They have personal opinion about everything, and they don't need arguments in most of cases. That's why this book is very good to understand that the human nature, so-called human nature, is so strange thing, It's not about regulation. I recommend this book for many people, at least for 10, 20 more years. Maybe some new books will do something like that, but this book is like good advice and very easy way to understand people and human nature nowadays.
Thank you so much for this insightful interview and for a book recommendation.
You're welcome all the time.